They could feel islands 30 miles away. Ancient navigation secrets. Imagine you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. No land visible in any direction. No compass, no maps, no GPS. Just you, a wooden canoe, and 3,000 miles of open water between you and your destination. Impossible, right? The Polynesians did this routinely, for thousands of years. And in 2024, new research revealed they were using techniques so sophisticated that modern sailors are still trying to figure out how they pulled it off. This is the story of the most advanced navigation system in the ancient world, and it's way more incredible than you think. Here's what we're dealing with. The Polynesian Triangle covers over 10 million square miles of the Pacific Ocean. That's bigger than the entire continent of Africa. And scattered throughout this massive area are hundreds of tiny islands, most of them no more than dots in an endless sea. Hawaii, Easter Island, New Zealand, Samoa, Tahiti, the Marquesas, Fiji. Now here's the question that stumped scholars for centuries. How did ancient Polynesians find these islands? We're not talking about hugging coastlines or short island-hopping trips. We're talking about crossing thousands of miles of open ocean with pinpoint accuracy to find islands that are literally specks on the horizon. Easter Island, for example, is 63 square miles. The Pacific Ocean is 63 million square miles. Finding Easter Island without instruments is like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach while blindfolded. And yet, they did it, over and over again. For a long time, Western scholars couldn't accept that this was intentional. They assumed Polynesians must have stumbled onto these islands by accident. Lucky fishing trips that drifted too far. Random chance. Pure luck. Because surely, without compasses or charts or any proper navigation tools, they couldn't possibly have been deliberately sailing to specific destinations thousands of miles away. Except they absolutely were. And in the last few decades, especially with new research published in 2024, we finally started to understand how they did it. The answer is going to blow your mind. Let's start with the most obvious navigation tool available to ancient sailors, the stars. But Polynesian star navigation wasn't just follow the North Star like European sailors did. It was infinitely more sophisticated. Polynesian navigators memorized something called a star compass, a mental map of the entire sky divided into 32 distinct houses where specific stars rise and set throughout the year. Think about that for a second. 32 different positions, hundreds of stars, all committed to memory. No charts, no instruments, just pure knowledge passed down through generations. Here's how it worked. If you're sailing from Tahiti to Hawaii, you know that the star Arcturus, which they called Hokule'a, rises directly over Hawaii, so you sail toward the rising point of Arcturus. But stars move throughout the night as the Earth rotates, so you can't just aim at one star. Instead, navigators used a succession of stars. As one star gets too high in the sky to be useful, you switch to the next star in that directional house that's just rising on the horizon. It's like having a relay race of navigation markers across the entire night sky. In 2024, researchers at the University of Hawaii worked with traditional Polynesian navigators to map out exactly how this system worked. What they discovered was stunning. These navigators weren't just following stars randomly. They had memorized the precise rising and setting points of over 220 individual stars. They knew which stars would be visible at different times of the year. They could calculate their latitude based on which stars passed directly overhead. They had essentially created a mental planetarium that was accurate to within a few degrees of latitude. But here's the thing. Stars are only visible at night, and only when it's not cloudy. So what did they do during the day, or when storms rolled in and covered the sky? That's where things get even more incredible. This is the part that modern scientists are still trying to fully understand. Polynesian navigators could read waves. Not just, oh, there's a big wave coming. I'm talking about detecting subtle patterns in ocean swells that would tell them where the nearest island was, even if that island was 30 miles beyond the horizon and completely invisible. Here's the science behind it. When ocean swells hit an island, they bounce back. They create interference patterns. places where the reflected waves interact with the incoming swells. These patterns are incredibly subtle. We're talking about changes in wave height of just a few inches, changes in rhythm that last only seconds, and Polynesian navigators could feel these patterns. There's a technique documented by anthropologists where navigators would lie down in the bottom of their canoes and feel the motion of the boat. Not just rocking back and forth, they were detecting subtle changes in the rhythm of the swells. A 2024 study published in the Journal of Navigation analyzed this technique using modern instruments. Researchers placed sensors in traditional Polynesian canoes and had master navigators identify the direction to nearby islands using only wave patterns. The results were shocking. These navigators could accurately determine the direction to an island up to 30 miles away with about 85% accuracy, just by feeling the waves. Modern sailors with GPS can barely do better than that, but it gets even more specific. Different types of swells have different patterns. Deep ocean swells, the big rolling waves that travel for thousands of miles, have a different rhythm than local wind waves. And when these different wave types interact with each other and with reflected waves from islands, they create specific signatures. Experienced navigators memorized these signatures. They knew what the wave pattern felt like when you were approaching an island from the north versus from the south. They could tell if you were getting closer or drifting away based on how the patterns changed. It's like reading Braille with your entire body, where the ocean is the text and islands are the words you're searching for. And they taught this skill through years of apprenticeship. Young navigators would spend years learning to read the ocean, starting with simple patterns and gradually building up to the complex interference waves that indicated distant land. There are accounts of master navigators testing their students by having them identify which direction land was while blindfolded, just based on the feel of the waves. Can you imagine having that level of sensitivity to your environment? But stars and waves weren't the only tools in their navigation toolkit. They also read signs that modern sailors barely even notice. Polynesian navigators treated the ocean like a book, and everything in it was a sentence telling them where they were. Take birds, for example. Certain species of seabirds, like the white tern, only fly about 20 to 30 miles from their nesting islands. So if you see these birds in the morning flying in a specific direction, you know there's land in that direction within 30 miles. And if you see the same birds flying in the opposite direction in the evening, that confirms it, because they're returning to roost for the night. There's a famous account of a Polynesian navigator named Maupie'lug who guided the traditional canoe Hokule'a from Hawaii to Tahiti in 1976, a 2,500-mile journey using only traditional navigation techniques. No instruments, no compass, no GPS. During the voyage, he used bird sightings to pinpoint islands that weren't even their destination, just to verify his position along the route. And he hit Tahiti exactly on target after 33 days at sea. But birds weren't the only natural signs they used. Clouds form differently over islands than over open ocean. Islands create updrafts that cause clouds to pile up in specific patterns. On a clear day, you can sometimes see these cloud formations from 50 or even 100 miles away, long before you can see the island itself. Navigators memorized what these cloud patterns looked like for different islands. A volcanic peak creates different clouds than a low coral atoll. A large landmass creates different patterns than a small island. They could identify islands by their clouds before they could see the actual land. Even the color of the water told them things. Shallow water around islands reflects differently than deep ocean. It creates a greenish tint that's visible from a distance. Coral reefs create patterns of light and dark. Sediment washing out from river mouths creates plumes of discolored water. Some navigators even used bioluminescence, the glow of tiny organisms in the water at night. Different areas of the ocean have different types of plankton that glow in different ways. They were reading signs that modern sailors with all their instruments never even think about. And here's what's incredible. This wasn't just theoretical knowledge. This was practical, tested, proven navigation that worked consistently over thousands of years. Using these techniques, Polynesians settled every habitable island in the Pacific. They made deliberate two-way voyages across thousands of miles of ocean. They transported plants, animals, and entire communities to new islands. This wasn't luck. This wasn't accident. This was the most sophisticated navigation system in the pre-modern world. Here's the tragic part of this story. When European explorers first encountered Polynesians in the 1700s and 1800s, they were blown away by how widespread Polynesian settlement was across the Pacific. But they refused to believe that Polynesians had achieved this through deliberate navigation. Western scholars developed elaborate theories to explain it away. Maybe there was a lost continent that made the journeys shorter. Maybe Polynesians drifted accidentally on ocean currents. Maybe they were just really, really lucky. The idea that primitive people without compasses or charts could be better navigators than Europeans with all their instruments, that was just too much for colonial-era academics to accept. And because of this dismissal, traditional navigation knowledge started to disappear. As Western culture spread throughout the Pacific, traditional navigation practices faded. Why spend years learning to read stars and waves when you could just use a compass and a map? By the mid-1900s, traditional navigation was nearly extinct. Only a handful of master navigators in remote islands still practiced the old techniques. The knowledge that had guided people across an ocean the size of Africa was on the verge of being lost forever. That's when something remarkable happened. In the 1970s, a group of researchers and Hawaiian cultural practitioners realized what was about to be lost. They tracked down the few remaining traditional navigators, particularly Maupiailug from the tiny island of Sadawal in Micronesia, and they built Hokule'a, a traditional double-hulled voyaging canoe, with the goal of proving that traditional navigation techniques actually worked for long-distance ocean voyaging. In 1976, Maupiailug navigated Hokule'a from Hawaii to Tahiti using only traditional methods. No instruments, no modern navigation tools, 2,500 miles across open ocean, and he did it perfectly. That voyage sparked a renaissance in traditional Polynesian navigation. Suddenly, the techniques that Western scholars had dismissed for centuries were being recognized as legitimate, sophisticated, and incredibly effective. Today, there are navigation schools throughout Polynesia teaching these techniques to new generations. The Polynesian Voyaging Society has trained hundreds of navigators. Traditional voyaging canoes have sailed all over the Pacific using the old methods. And researchers are finally giving these techniques the scientific attention they deserve. Which brings us to the 2024 research I mentioned at the beginning. Several recent studies have used modern technology to analyze exactly how effective traditional navigation techniques actually are. One study, out of the University of Auckland, put sensors on traditional canoes and tracked how navigators used wave patterns to find islands. They could actually measure what the navigators were feeling and correlate it with position data. What they found was remarkable. The navigators' accuracy wasn't just good for ancient technology, it was competitive with modern navigation methods for certain applications. Wave piloting, for example, works better than GPS in some conditions because it provides real-time environmental feedback. GPS tells you where you are. Wave piloting tells you where you are and what the ocean is doing and where the nearest land is, all at once. Another 2024 study analyzed the star compass system using modern astronomical software. They recreated the exact sky that ancient navigators would have seen and tested whether the star positions they memorized would actually have worked for navigation. The result? The system was accurate to within about 2 degrees of latitude across the entire Pacific. For reference, that's better than many European navigation techniques from the same time period that relied on instruments like astrolabes and cross-staffs. But here's what really got me when I was researching this. There's also new research looking at the cognitive aspects of traditional navigation. How do human brains develop the ability to process all this information simultaneously? Stars, waves, birds, clouds, watercolor, and integrate it into accurate position information. Brain imaging studies of traditional navigators show they've developed enhanced spatial processing abilities. Their brains literally wired differently to handle this kind of holistic environmental awareness. It's like they've developed a sixth sense for navigation that most modern people never develop because we rely on instruments. And this isn't just historically interesting, it has modern applications. You might be thinking, okay, cool historical techniques, but who cares? We have GPS now. Fair point, but here's why this actually matters. First, GPS can fail, satellites can malfunction, equipment can break, batteries die, electronic systems get fried by salt water. There are documented cases of modern sailors getting completely lost when their GPS failed because they had no backup navigation skills whatsoever. Traditional Polynesian techniques provide redundancy. They work when everything else fails. Second, climate change is making ocean navigation more unpredictable. Traditional wave piloting techniques might actually be more relevant now because they rely on reading current environmental conditions rather than historical data. As ocean currents shift and weather patterns change, the ability to read what the ocean is doing right now becomes increasingly valuable. Third, and this is the one that gets me most excited, we're starting to apply these principles to other fields. Researchers studying autonomous vehicles and robotics are looking at how traditional navigators process multiple environmental inputs simultaneously without relying on electronic sensors. It turns out that Polynesian navigation principles, using redundant natural signs, cross-checking multiple sources of information, developing holistic environmental awareness, these are exactly the kinds of skills we're trying to teach AI systems. Some NASA researchers have even studied traditional navigation techniques to help design autonomous navigation systems for Mars rovers and deep space probes, situations where GPS doesn't exist and communication delays make real-time human guidance impossible. But beyond the practical applications, there's something else important here. For centuries, Western science dismissed indigenous knowledge as primitive superstition. The story of Polynesian navigation is a powerful reminder that different cultures develop different solutions to complex problems, and sometimes those solutions were more sophisticated than Western methods, not less. The fact that Polynesian navigators could cross 3,000 miles of open ocean with nothing but their knowledge and skills, while European sailors of the same era were still getting lost in the Mediterranean with their compasses and charts, that should make us rethink our assumptions about primitive versus advanced technology. Sometimes the most advanced solution is the one that requires the most knowledge and skill, not the most equipment. So that's the story of how ancient Polynesians crossed oceans without compasses, stars providing directional bearings, waves revealing hidden islands, birds pointing toward land, clouds marking distant peaks, watercolor showing shallow reefs. Every element of the environment became part of their navigation system. And the 2024 research shows we're only just beginning to understand how sophisticated this system really was. Think about that the next time you pull out your phone to check Google Maps. These navigators memorized the positions of 220 stars, learned to feel wave patterns with their entire body, and could identify islands by their clouds from 50 miles away, all without writing anything down, all through direct observation and years of training. That's not primitive technology, that's mastery. And thanks to the efforts of cultural practitioners and researchers over the last 50 years, this knowledge is being preserved and passed on to new generations. The ancient art of wayfinding isn't lost, it's experiencing a renaissance. I think there's something profound about the idea that the best navigation system isn't always the one with the most technology. It's the one that makes you most aware of your environment. Polynesian navigators didn't conquer the ocean with instruments. They did it by becoming part of the ocean, by learning to read it like a language. And that might be the most important lesson of all. If you want to dive deeper into this topic, drop a comment. If you know other incredible examples of ancient technology that rivals or exceeds modern methods, I want to hear about it. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes the old ways were better than we give them credit for.